Right now, millions of people are swiping through dating apps, sharing their deepest secrets with strangers on the other side of a screen. We treat romance scams as a modern problem, but human desperation and the manipulation that preys on it has looked exactly the same for nearly a century. To understand how deep that trap can go, we have to look back to the early 1930s. The Great Depression had fractured small-town America. Banks were collapsing, homes were foreclosed on, and a deep, isolating poverty settled over the country. You can see the physical toll of that collapse right here. Hundreds of men waiting on a city sidewalk just for the chance at a 5-cent meal. For many, securing basic survival was a daily, exhausting struggle. In the middle of this bleak landscape, thousands of people turned to the Lonely Hearts Club columns in their local newspapers. These matrimonial bureaus were the pre-internet dating network, offering widows and widowers a chance to connect through the mail. But in an era defined by extreme financial ruin, a promise of companionship was often tied to the desperate need for economic rescue. It created a vast, unprotected hunting ground for anyone willing to exploit that vulnerability. A man calling himself Cornelius O. Pearson placed an ad targeting those very columns. He described himself as a civil engineer worth $150,000, promising a beautiful 10-room mansion, a private car, and a life where a woman would have absolutely nothing to do but enjoy herself. The response was overwhelming. Up to 20 letters a day flooded his P.O. box from hopeful women all across the country. He sorted through them carefully, looking for specific targets: isolated, affluent widows looking for a savior. Cornelius Pearson did not exist. The man reading those letters was Harry Powers, an unassuming, pudgy local living in Clarksburg, West Virginia, operating entirely behind a fake identity. To his neighbors, Powers was completely unthreatening. He was a married man who spent his days quietly running this local grocery store with his wife, surrounded by canned goods and tea boxes. Powers realized he didn't need to earn his own fortune. He only needed to maintain this quiet, ordinary facade while weaponizing his postal alias to convince vulnerable women to willingly hand over their life savings. He convinced his wife to finance a new construction project on their property in Quiet Dell, an incredibly isolated farming community set deep within the West Virginia hills. He told her it was just a concrete building to keep vegetables fresh. The reality was far more sinister. Beneath the garage floor, he poured thick concrete to create a windowless, subterranean bunker, partitioned off into several small cells with heavy locking doors. While the cement was still curing, Powers asked a local boy to step down into the dark cells and scream as loud as possible. He needed to verify the walls were completely soundproof. With the trap finished, he selected his prey, Asta Eicher, a 50-year-old widow living comfortably with her 3 children hundreds of miles away in Park Ridge, Illinois. Powers arrived at her home carrying a massive bouquet of flowers. He spent 5 days charming Asta and introducing himself to her neighbors as an old family friend before convincing her to leave with him on a private trip. Asta packed her bags and walked willingly into his control. The fiction he had meticulously built through his letters provided such a complete illusion of safety and wealth that it completely masked the concrete trap waiting for her in West Virginia. His financial extraction plan hit a sudden wall. When Powers sent one of Asta's children into a local bank to withdraw the remaining balance of her account, the teller looked at Asta's signature on the check, recognized it as a blatant forgery, and refused to hand over the cash. Panicked and empty-handed, Powers hastily gathered Asta's 3 children from their nurse, threw them into his car, and immediately fled the state. Incredibly, his greed brought him back to Illinois weeks later. He pulled up to the Eicher house with a moving crew, emptying the property of its heavy furniture right in front of suspicious neighbors. He tried to cover his tracks by having Asta's teenage daughter, Greta, write a letter to a friend describing a wonderful vacation in Colorado. That letter became his undoing. While the handwritten text clearly stated the family was in Colorado, the envelope's official postmark proved it was actually mailed from Clarksburg, West Virginia. Local police followed that single geographical mismatch straight to the Clarksburg post office. They cross-referenced the name Cornelius Pearson and found the local P.O. box rented directly by the mild-mannered grocery store owner, Harry Powers. He had spent months constructing a physically impenetrable, soundproof prison. Yet his absolute arrogance in managing the paper trail, a simple forged check and a careless postmark, tore his entire operation apart. When police forced their way into the quiet rural garage, they found the concrete cells below. The floors held thick pools of blood, a child's bloody footprint, chunks of violently ripped human hair, and scattered clothing. Outside, men with shovels dug into a freshly covered ditch near the creek. They unearthed 5 heavily decomposing bodies, wrapped tightly in cheap burlap: Asta, her 3 young children, and another widow from Massachusetts named Dorothy Lemke. Following an intense police interrogation that left him with 2 black eyes, Powers stood by his cell door. He stared blankly at the camera, showing absolutely no emotion as he confessed to the killings. Outside the county jail, an enraged mob of 5,000 people demanded he be handed over for lynching. Yet simultaneously, opportunistic locals erected a fence around the open graves and began charging admission to crowds eager to see the slaughterhouse. Families arrived by the truckload, tearing pieces of wood from the barn to keep as souvenirs. The morbid, carnival-like looting of the crime scene exposed a society so beaten down by the Depression that brutal, localized tragedy had become mass entertainment. The national media frenzy grew so large that no standard courtroom could hold the spectators. The state forced the murder trial onto the stage of a grand 1,200-seat opera house. The prosecution overwhelmed the defense. They paraded physical artifacts and stark black-and-white crime scene photographs before the audience, directly linking Powers to the violent final moments of his victims. The jury deliberated in an opera dressing room for less than 2 hours. They returned with a guilty verdict, and the judge swiftly sentenced Harry Powers to hang. He was transferred behind the heavy, imposing stone walls of the West Virginia Penitentiary to await execution. Just hours before his death, the warden asked him directly if he wanted to clear his conscience regarding the 50 other missing women suspected to have fallen into his trap. Powers simply shrugged his shoulders and replied that 50 more wouldn't make a difference. Whether the bait is printed in 1930s newspaper ink or pushed through the algorithms of a modern screen, the technology of romance evolves, but the psychology of the predator waiting in the dark remains exactly the same.